There are houses that become famous for their beauty. Others become famous for their history. This house became famous because it refused to explain its silence. For days, nothing moved behind its windows. No voices drifted into the street. No children laughed. Even the family's 2 dogs had disappeared. Neighbors noticed the quiet, but quiet alone isn't unusual. Families travel, people relocate, life changes. This looked like another ordinary departure. Then letters began arriving, each offering an explanation that seemed unusual enough to remember, yet believable enough not to question immediately. According to those letters, the family had left France forever, beginning a secret new life connected to work for the United States government. It sounded improbable, almost unbelievable. Yet the messages contained enough personal detail that friends hesitated before dismissing them outright. Days became weeks, and the silence settled deeper over the property, as though the house itself had been abandoned in careful stages. When police finally stepped inside, they weren't entering a crime scene. They believed they were checking on a family that had quietly vanished. Nothing immediately contradicted that assumption. The furniture remained neatly arranged. Everyday belongings sat exactly where they should have been. There were no shattered windows, no overturned rooms, no obvious struggle. Everything suggested people had simply walked away without looking back. But experienced investigators know that sometimes what's missing matters far more than what's left behind. As officers examined the property more closely, subtle details began refusing to fit the story described in those carefully written letters. Outside, attention shifted toward the backyard, where one small area appeared different from everything surrounding it. The ground beneath the patio seemed recently disturbed. It wasn't dramatic, just unusual enough to deserve a closer look. No one standing there could have imagined that beneath several inches of earth rested the answer to one mystery and the beginning of another. Investigators began digging carefully, expecting perhaps discarded evidence, buried belongings, or something that might explain the family's sudden disappearance. Instead, they uncovered one of the most disturbing crime scenes in modern French history, hidden beneath an ordinary suburban home. Every member of the family was there, except one, the husband and father, Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès. From that moment forward, the investigation stopped asking where the family had gone and began asking where Xavier had gone. More than 15 years later, that question remains unanswered, making this one of Europe's most enduring criminal mysteries. To understand how investigators reached that horrifying discovery, we first need to understand the family hidden beneath that quiet backyard. The Dupont de Ligonnès family lived in Nantes, a historic city in western France, known for its peaceful neighborhoods and centuries-old architecture. From the outside, they appeared like many middle-class families trying to balance work, education, and everyday responsibilities. Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès came from an aristocratic French family, carrying a respected surname with generations of history behind it. Although his family name suggested privilege, Xavier's adult life was far less stable than many outsiders assumed. Over the years, he pursued several business ventures, but lasting financial success continued to slip beyond his reach. His wife Agnès focused largely on raising their children, while the family attempted to maintain a sense of normal everyday life. Together, they were raising 4 children: Arthur, Thomas, Anne, and Benoit, each with routines, friendships, and plans for the future. Teachers remembered students attending class. Friends remembered conversations. Neighbors remembered passing greetings that never seemed especially unusual. Nothing publicly suggested that this family would soon become the center of one of France's most haunting investigations. Yet behind the ordinary routines, financial pressure had quietly become part of Xavier's daily reality. Business difficulties accumulated over several years, leaving debts that investigators would later examine as part of the family's history. Financial hardship alone does not explain violent crime, and investigators never treated it as a simple answer to an extraordinarily complex case. Still, understanding those mounting pressures helped investigators reconstruct the final months leading toward the family's disappearance. Friends described Xavier as intelligent, polite, and capable of appearing calm, even during periods of obvious personal difficulty. That ability to remain composed would later become one of the most unsettling aspects of the entire investigation. Because while friends believed life was continuing normally, small changes had already begun unfolding inside the family's daily routine. The first changes attracted little attention because each one, viewed alone, seemed perfectly capable of having an innocent explanation. Children occasionally miss school. Families sometimes relocate unexpectedly. Employers receive resignations without much notice. None of those events are especially alarming by themselves. But investigators would later discover that these ordinary moments weren't isolated at all. They formed a pattern that only became visible afterward. One by one, the family's usual routines quietly disappeared, leaving behind questions that nobody thought to ask in real time. School administrators were informed that the children would no longer be attending classes because the family had relocated overseas. Friends received messages explaining that an unexpected opportunity required immediate travel and absolute discretion about their new destination. Those explanations sounded unusual, yet they arrived with enough confidence that very few people immediately suspected something far darker. By the time investigators compared those messages with what lay beneath the backyard patio, every reassuring explanation had taken on an entirely different meaning. As investigators reconstructed the timeline, they realized the family's disappearance hadn't happened suddenly. It unfolded through a series of deliberate, carefully timed decisions. Each new record uncovered another piece of the puzzle, revealing preparations that appeared increasingly difficult to dismiss as coincidence. The family's mail had been redirected, personal obligations had been addressed. Several loose ends seemed intentionally tied up before anyone vanished. It was as though someone had anticipated every question friends, neighbors, schools, and employers might eventually ask. Investigators now faced an unsettling possibility. This wasn't simply a disappearance. Someone had worked hard to make the disappearance look believable. Attention quickly shifted to Xavier's final known days inside the family home, searching for anything that explained what had happened there. Phone records, financial activity, and witness accounts began forming a clearer picture, though many important hours remained frustratingly undocumented. No single piece of evidence explained the tragedy. Instead, investigators relied on dozens of ordinary details that became extraordinary once assembled together. The deeper they looked, the more carefully planned the entire sequence of events appeared to have been. Then forensic specialists turned their attention to the burial site beneath the patio, where the most important physical evidence awaited examination. The graves had not been dug hastily. They appeared deliberately prepared before being carefully concealed beneath the property. For investigators, that level of preparation suggested time, planning, and a determination to delay discovery for as long as possible. Each member of the family had been placed in the burial site with a level of order that investigators carefully documented. Nearby, the family's 2 dogs were also found buried, reinforcing the conclusion that the entire household had disappeared together. Nothing about the scene suggested panic. Instead, investigators found evidence consistent with a crime that had been methodically organized beforehand. Forensic examinations helped establish how the victims died, providing investigators with crucial facts while leaving many larger questions unanswered. Those findings pointed investigators toward a single conclusion. This was not a random act committed in desperation or chaos. The evidence suggested forethought, but evidence alone could not explain why such careful preparation had taken place. Understanding motive would require investigators to step away from the burial site and retrace Xavier's final confirmed movements. By then, one fact had become impossible to ignore. Every member of the family had been accounted for except Xavier. No signs indicated he had been buried. No evidence suggested he had become another victim. Instead, investigators began discovering traces of someone traveling steadily across France after the family's final known days. Hotel registrations, fuel purchases, and electronic transactions gradually revealed a route stretching hundreds of miles from Nantes. Rather than disappearing immediately, Xavier appeared to move openly, leaving behind records that investigators would later piece together. Each confirmed stop answered one question while raising another. Why would someone trying to disappear leave such a visible trail? Investigators followed that trail through surveillance footage, receipts, and witness statements, carefully separating verified evidence from assumptions. The confirmed timeline showed Xavier traveling alone, moving farther south with each documented stop along the journey. Some witnesses later recalled brief encounters, though memories collected after major investigations are naturally treated with caution. Fortunately, several parts of Xavier's route were supported by documentary evidence rather than memory alone. Those verified records became the backbone of the investigation, allowing detectives to reconstruct his movements with reasonable confidence. The journey eventually led investigators to southern France, where Xavier checked into several accommodations during the final days of the known timeline. Nothing in those records immediately explained his intentions. He appeared calm, carrying on ordinary interactions without drawing significant attention. That ordinary behavior became deeply unsettling once investigators understood what had already happened back in Nantes. Every receipt, every hotel stay, and every recorded transaction became evidence examined through an entirely different lens. The route ultimately brought Xavier near the commune of Roquebrune-sur-Argens, surrounded by rugged hills and dense woodland. It was there that investigators documented his final confirmed movements based on available physical evidence. Surveillance images and transaction records placed him in the area, but none clearly revealed what happened afterward. The trail, so detailed for days, suddenly came to an abrupt end without any confirmed explanation. No verified border crossing followed, no confirmed flight, no authenticated financial activity. The documented evidence simply stopped. For investigators, that silence became almost as significant as the crime itself. Search teams began examining the surrounding countryside, hoping Xavier had not traveled much farther than his final confirmed location. The landscape presented enormous challenges with steep terrain, thick vegetation, and countless places where evidence could remain hidden. Despite extensive searches, investigators found nothing capable of answering the question that now dominated the entire case. Had Xavier died somewhere beyond the search area? Or had he successfully disappeared before anyone realized he was missing? As the physical trail faded into uncertainty, the investigation entered an entirely new phase, one that would eventually stretch far beyond the borders of France. As weeks turned into months, the search for Xavier shifted from a national investigation into one of Europe's most closely followed fugitive cases. French authorities circulated his photograph widely, asking the public to report any sighting, no matter how insignificant it seemed. Tips began arriving almost immediately, each carrying the possibility that the mystery was finally about to be solved. Most reports came from people convinced they had crossed paths with Xavier in cafes, hotels, train stations, or quiet village streets. Every credible lead demanded careful attention, because investigators couldn't afford to ignore the one report that might finally be genuine. Detectives compared witness descriptions with travel records, surveillance footage, and available evidence before deciding which leads deserved deeper investigation. Again and again, promising clues dissolved under closer examination, leaving investigators exactly where they had started. The growing number of false sightings highlighted a difficult reality. Public recognition alone could not solve a case built on uncertainty. Even so, authorities refused to close the investigation. Too many questions remained unanswered, and too much evidence pointed toward careful planning. As official searches continued, journalists across France began examining Xavier's life with renewed intensity, searching for overlooked details investigators might have missed. Old business records, personal relationships, and financial documents were revisited, but none revealed a confirmed escape plan. Instead, they painted the portrait of a man whose private struggles had grown increasingly difficult to separate from public appearances. That contrast became one of the case's defining features. Those who knew Xavier often remembered someone who appeared remarkably composed. Investigators understood that appearances can be misleading, but they still needed evidence capable of explaining what happened after southern France. Without confirmed sightings, every theory had to be measured against one simple standard. Did the documented facts actually support it? One possibility attracted immediate attention. Had Xavier ended his own life shortly after his final confirmed movements? The remote countryside surrounding Roquebrune-sur-Argent certainly offered places where someone could disappear without being quickly discovered. Yet despite extensive searches, no verified physical evidence ever confirmed that conclusion. Another theory suggested something entirely different, that Xavier had successfully escaped and begun living under another identity. Supporters of this idea pointed to the deliberate preparations made before the family's disappearance and the organized nature of his final journey. Investigators acknowledged the theory but also recognized its weaknesses. Living undetected for years requires extraordinary planning and remarkable luck. There has never been publicly confirmed evidence proving Xavier successfully established a new life under another name. A third possibility proposed that someone helped him after his last confirmed sighting, allowing him to avoid capture. While investigators have explored numerous connections over the years, no verified evidence has confirmed assistance from another person. The absence of definitive proof left every major theory balanced between possibility and uncertainty. For investigators, speculation could never replace evidence, no matter how convincing a theory might sound. Years passed, yet Xavier's face remained familiar throughout France, appearing in documentaries, newspapers, books, and televised investigations. Then, in 2019, headlines across Europe suddenly announced what seemed like the breakthrough everyone had been waiting for. A man had been detained in Scotland after authorities received information suggesting he could be Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès. News organizations rushed to report the arrest, and many believed one of France's greatest criminal mysteries had finally reached its conclusion. For a brief moment, it appeared investigators might finally learn where Xavier had been hiding for nearly 8 years. But criminal investigations demand certainty, not assumptions, and that certainty would come through forensic identification. DNA testing quickly established that the detained man was not Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès. The widely reported arrest had been a mistake, and one of the most hopeful moments in the investigation disappeared almost overnight. For investigators and the victim's loved ones, the disappointment was profound, but the search continued. The false identification also demonstrated how easily hope can outrun evidence in cases that remain unsolved for many years. Despite thousands of investigative hours, countless interviews, and international cooperation, Xavier's whereabouts remained officially unknown. The unanswered questions were no longer limited to the crime itself. They now centered on one missing man. How does someone leave behind so much documented evidence, then seemingly disappear without another confirmed trace? That question has challenged investigators, criminologists, journalists, and the public for more than a decade. Every few years, another reported sighting briefly reignites public interest before quietly fading under careful examination. Some leads appear promising at first, yet none have produced the verified evidence required to solve the mystery. Today, the official case remains open, and French authorities continue evaluating credible information whenever new reports emerge. The investigation has never reached the certainty that defines most criminal cases. Instead, it remains suspended between established facts and unanswered questions. And after years of searching, the greatest mystery is no longer what happened beneath the patio, but what happened to the only person who was never found. More than a decade has passed, yet the investigation continues to occupy a unique place in French criminal history because its final chapter remains unwritten. Most major homicide investigations eventually reach a courtroom, a confession, or a confirmed conclusion. This case reached none of those destinations. Instead, investigators were left with two separate tragedies: the deaths of an entire family and the disappearance of the man believed responsible. The confirmed evidence tells a detailed story until Xavier's final movements in southern France. After that, the historical record falls silent. That silence has allowed countless theories to grow, but theories should never be mistaken for established fact. The documented evidence remains surprisingly clear about some questions and remarkably incomplete about others. Investigators know where the family was found. They know how Xavier traveled across France. They know where his confirmed trail ended. What they cannot confirm is whether he died shortly afterward, escaped abroad, or remained hidden somewhere much closer than anyone imagined. Without verifiable evidence, each possibility remains exactly that, a possibility, not a conclusion. That distinction explains why this case continues to be studied by investigators, criminologists, and journalists years after the original investigation began. It is not simply the brutality of the crime that endures in public memory. It is the extraordinary absence of final answers. Many notorious criminal cases are remembered because investigators uncovered every detail. This one is remembered because one crucial detail remains missing. Some mysteries fade as public attention moves elsewhere. This investigation has repeatedly returned because each new lead briefly promises resolution. Then, as before, careful examination separates verified evidence from hopeful assumptions, leaving the central mystery unresolved. For the victims' relatives and those who knew the family, every false lead has carried both hope and disappointment. Behind every headline is a family whose lives ended long before the mystery surrounding Xavier captured international attention. Remembering that reality is essential because the victims should never be overshadowed by the disappearance of the prime suspect. Arthur, Thomas, Anne, Benoit, and Agnès were more than names attached to an investigation. They were people whose futures ended inside their own home. The unanswered questions surrounding Xavier do not erase the certainty surrounding their loss. For French investigators, the case also became a reminder that meticulous planning can complicate even the most determined criminal investigation. Every document, receipt, surveillance image, and forensic finding helped reconstruct the past, but none revealed what happened after Xavier disappeared. That missing chapter continues to define the case more than any single piece of evidence discovered during the investigation. Today, Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès remains one of France's most wanted fugitives, and authorities continue reviewing credible information when it emerges. The passage of time has not officially closed the investigation, nor has it answered the questions that first emerged beneath that quiet backyard patio. Each passing year makes solving the mystery more difficult, yet history has shown that long unsolved cases can still produce unexpected breakthroughs. Some investigations are solved because one witness finally speaks, others because forgotten evidence is re-examined using new technology. Whether this case will ever reach that moment remains impossible to predict using the evidence currently available. Until then, the official record ends where Xavier's confirmed journey ended, with questions that investigators still cannot answer with certainty. Perhaps the truth disappeared into the forests surrounding southern France. Perhaps it crossed a border. Perhaps it lies somewhere no one has searched. Those possibilities continue to be discussed, but none has been verified by evidence capable of closing the case. That is what makes this investigation so enduring. It demands patience, not speculation, and evidence, not assumptions. In a world where information often arrives instantly, this mystery reminds us that some answers remain beyond even the most exhaustive investigations. For more than 15 years, one question has echoed through police files, documentaries, and conversations across France and beyond. Where is Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès? It is a question supported by thousands of investigative hours, yet answered by no confirmed piece of evidence. Perhaps one overlooked detail still exists, waiting inside an old record, an overlooked witness statement, or a future forensic discovery. Or perhaps the final answer disappeared with the only person who could fully explain what happened inside that family home. Until evidence proves otherwise, the mystery remains officially unresolved and the search for certainty continues. Cases like this endure because they challenge both investigators and the public to separate what is known from what is merely believed. That discipline protects the integrity of history, especially in investigations where speculation can easily overshadow documented facts. The story of the Dupont de Ligonnès family is remembered not only for its tragedy, but also for the questions that still resist answers. If future evidence ever emerges, it may rewrite the final chapter of this extraordinary investigation. Until then, the mystery remains unfinished. What do you believe happened after Xavier's final confirmed sighting? Share your thoughts, but remember to distinguish theory from established evidence. If you found this documentary thoughtful and informative, consider subscribing for more carefully researched historical crime investigations grounded in verified facts. And if there's another historical crime case you'd like us to explore, leave your suggestion below. Until next time, thank you for watching.